Hello, my name is David Meyer. Robert Strong asked for me to prepare for you, the organizers of TEDx Silicon Valley, a brief video to help you evaluate if I'm someone you might like to have come speak at this year's event. I'm very flattered and honored to even be considered for this opportunity. So I'm going to record for you two brief presentations, either one of which I could give at the event. I'm also happy to create a different presentation based upon your needs. And this first presentation I call Eye on the Goal, Why All Nonprofits Should Live by the Numbers. Now let me start by telling you three things about myself that are going to relate to what I'm about to tell you. First is, I am president and co-founder of AdoptAPet.com. That is the world's largest nonprofit homeless pet adoption website. We help over 10,000 animal shelters across the United States and Canada find homes for their homeless pets. We have 1.5 million unique visitors who pass through our website each month, and our innovative strategy and quick growth has caught the attention of the world's largest pet food producer, Purina, who is now our primary corporate sponsor and underwriter. I was also called to assist in 2005 in leading the post-Katrina pet rescue efforts in the city of New Orleans. I coordinated over 1,000 volunteers, and we rescued upwards of 17,000 companion animals who had been left stranded in the city. Lastly, I want to share with you that I am the current two-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the black belt level in my division. I am also the current Pan American Games Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt champion and also the current US Open Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt champion. I only share that with you just to tell you, don't mess with me. No, I say that because my martial arts experience helps inform how I achieve my goals in my nonprofit work, and I'll explain more of that in a moment. There's a problem in the nonprofit world, and that is organizations have general stated missions and they work towards those missions, whether it be literacy or world hunger or preventing AIDS, or in my case, helping animals. But they don't have specific numerical goals attached to the outcomes they're trying to achieve. Now that's in stark contrast to the for-profit world. In the for-profit world, there are very clear numerical goals, there are sales numbers, profit numbers that need to be hit, and if those numbers don't get hit, people get fired. If a company is producing a substandard product or their competitor is beating them and they're not innovating, that company is eventually going to fold. In the nonprofit world, those Darwinian forces don't operate in the same way. In fact, the Darwinian forces in the nonprofit world is a competition for the ability to achieve funding. So it's quite possible that an organization could be very effective at its stated mission, doing something in its community very good and having a very good effect, but not be good at communicating that to donors or to granting agencies, and so that organization doesn't grow and thrive. While another organization might not be nearly as effective overall in its achieving its stated goals, but is very effective at fundraising, very effective at telling a story in a newsletter, and therefore can receive a lot of funding. And so the force of natural selection that's operating in the nonprofit world is to put your best and your brightest for fundraising, for capital campaigns. That's where there's actual measurable goals, but when it comes to the mission, achieving the mission, that tends to be more vague. I think it's very important for all nonprofits to start living by the numbers. You've got to find a way to set a numerical goal attached with your mission goal. And I can give as an example of that AdoptAPet.com, my organization. Now, of course, we're a website, so we have a lot of tangible metrics that we can rely on. But our basic goal is to increase our site traffic, to get our message out to people who maybe weren't even thinking to adopt a pet, and to get feedback from shelters to be sure that we're actually increasing their adoptions. And if those metrics don't continue to get better and better and better, I will be fired. Now, one of the ways that we do that, just as an example, is we make specific efforts to advertise our pets to people who weren't even thinking of adopting a pet, but who may have been wanting to go buy a pet from a breeder or a pet store. And we're very successful at that, and that's just one example of how we set a very specific strategic goal, we attach numbers to it, and we evaluate ourselves based upon how good we are at achieving that goal. The second point I think nonprofits need to remember is to stay on task and evaluate every action based upon that goal. And from that I'll give you a quick example from my experience during the pet rescue efforts in Katrina in New Orleans. We had a very specific goal, was to rescue as many animals as possible, and we had a very serious time constraint. Animals had been left in homes and they were starving, and it was only a matter of days before it would simply be too late. Now, if any nonprofit organization is functioning right now without a sense of that urgency, then they're not concentrating on the right task. Because when you think about it, whatever it is the task that you're trying to do, there should be a sense of immediacy and urgency surrounding that. In our case, it was very, very real. We were provided with a list of addresses that people who'd been calling in from an 800 number in Houston, where most of the refugees were, had reported that they had left their pets. And we had very limited time to get to those animals. In the first 2 weeks of the rescue, we didn't have this information, and we were left to walking around the streets listening for dogs. And of course, you couldn't hear cats. So when we got that list, we decided, based upon our goal of rescuing the maximum amount of animals possible, we would first concentrate on cats, and first concentrate on cats in apartment buildings, because that would be the kind of place that we would not have walked through, and there may still be animals who had not yet starved to death and who would be alive. And sure enough, I went out with the teams on the first day that we got that list. I went up to a house. The house had been covered in mud, but it looked to me like it was possible an animal could be inside. And sure enough, the person who had called in had reported that they left a cat. And when I kicked in the door, there was an emaciated, starving little kitty looking up at me who came right to me. I immediately took the cat out of that toxic environment where mold had been beginning to grow. We went out front, I took off my mask, and I pulled out my cell phone. I called the number of the person who had reported this cat left in the house. I got him on the phone and I said, "My name is David Meyer. I am leading the rescue effort in the city of New Orleans for companion animals. I've got bad news and I've got good news for you. The bad news is your house is destroyed. The good news is I'm holding your cat." And it was a very emotional moment for us. The man began to cry. Turns out he was a New Orleans police officer, and he had rescued that kitten out of a dumpster, and he felt terrible that he'd left the cat behind. But of course, when he evacuated, he didn't know he wouldn't be back. He didn't know the city would be flooded and he wouldn't be back in several days, and he felt terribly guilty. We were able to reunite him with the cat, and I give that only as an example of how we were able to remain very, very goal-focused, each day making sure that every step we took was meeting our goal. The last thing I think nonprofits need to focus on is innovation, the ability to adapt and course correct. This is where I draw on my martial arts experience. Why am I so successful in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? I haven't lost a match in approximately, I think it's 3 years. I haven't even had a point scored against me. It's not that I'm the strongest person in the sport. I am strong, but I'm not the strongest. I'm fast, but I'm not the fastest guy. I'm certainly the best looking competitor in the sport, but as you might guess, that doesn't really help me win matches. But what it is I have the ability to adapt to the situation as it unfolds and course correct. So I have a specific goal, and the goal is to win the match, and I know different ways of doing that. But I can't control how we're going to get there. It may be that my opponent is going to do something unexpected. It's often the case that he's bigger or stronger than me. So I have to adapt to what's being presented to me and constantly reassess and course correct, making sure that we're constantly moving towards the goal that I know is going to happen, which is I'm going to win the match. And we do that in our nonprofit, and all nonprofits need to do that. They need to set those numerical goals so they can actually tell, are we doing better this year than last year or worse? Are we headed in the direction we want to go? And they need to stay on task, evaluate every action based upon that goal. So when they make budgetary decisions or staffing decisions, is it going to move us towards the stated goal? And lastly, they need to constantly innovate and adapt and course correct, assessing, are we moving in the right direction? Are we not moving in the right direction? Do we need to adjust the goal? That is my presentation, and thank you very much for listening.